Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast with your host, Corrine Zutleger. Join us as we uncover the hidden thoughts, stories, and moments that help bring light to the healing power of truth and examine how silence can affect us mentally, physically, and spiritually. We'll also share profound stories, interviews, and transformative narratives to help release ourselves from the hidden and step into healing towards inner peace, joy, and fulfillment. Now, here's your healing strategist and host, Corrine.
Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast. Hello, everyone. We have Laura Ollinger today as the guest, and she has her business is called Positively Healthy Coaching. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself.
Well, thanks so much for having me today, Corrine. It's so great to see you. And yes, so I'm a teen and parent well-being coach. I've got a background in, I've got a master's in health and wellness education. I'm a national board certified health and wellness coach. I'm a licensed neuroencoding specialist, and I've got lots of other certifications. But my biggest one is just my life experience of being a mom of 4 kids. I've got a 16-year-old daughter, a 15-year-old son, a 13-year-old son, and an 11-year-old daughter.
Awesome. I love that there's honestly nothing better than on the job experience. And then you get to share that wisdom with this community. And I'm grateful for that. Um, this idea of the Secret Keepers came about with having seen the show Downton Abbey and watching the matriarch of the family keep the secrets and how those secrets affect us on a physical level, on a spiritual level, and on the emotional, mental level. And what I would like to add is that, if you are someone who's experiencing um, any sort of issue, that the advice given on here is of opinion only, and to seek your medical professionals if you need assistance. With that being said, um, you know tell the audience anyways, a little bit about the secret that you kept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think there's been lots of secrets throughout my life, as I'm sure we all have, but kind of started out in my childhood where it was just the general image that my family was trying to portray. There wasn't like a specific secret per se, but it was all about kind of having that, perfect family image. And, it was kind of just known that we didn't want to embarrass the family in any way, and that our behavior was expected to reflect our high standing in the community. And so that kind of just became my programming for like what was the ideal family or the ideal life, because you don't know anything different when you're a kid. So I grew up, and I had the kind of vision for my life with the person that became my husband, and then I had the 4 children, of having this beautiful life and having the beautiful house and the right pets and the right vacations and all these things. And it was all very much like surface level image, and that to me that felt false. It felt fake, and I wasn't quite sure why. I didn't even know what I was stuffing down, because I wasn't really connected with my authentic self. But to get to the big secret, and the big trauma in my life was my husband had an affair for 3 years. While we were married, I caught him multiple times, and I tried to repair the marriage. I thought, we have 4 children, we built a beautiful home. I didn't want to just throw away that marriage right away. Um, but I kept it a secret because I didn't want my family or my friends to know what he had done in case we did stay together. I didn't want his image to be forever tarnished, because it would make things awkward and uncomfortable. So I kept this secret, and that secret made me very sick physically. I lost like 20 pounds, and I became extremely anxious. I was extremely depressed. I was just like a skeleton, and I was barely even functioning at times. I remember even one time just like laying on the floor, not being able to move. And it was all because I was holding the secret and a lot of pain, but without the help and support that I needed.
Yeah. And I can only imagine what that was like for you. And trying to repair that marriage and probably in some way, shape, or form believing that somehow this was your fault, if you will. Wearing that mask of the perfect family still as you're going about knowing that these things are happening, and you're like, this is, if people find out, there's going to be so much judgment around that, and then the shame that can be carried and the guilt that can be carried. And but you were able to rise above that. You were able to heal from that. Can you walk us through that journey a little bit?
I totally can, but I would love to pick up on that point about shame and the judgment,
Sure.
um, because that's absolutely it. I remember meeting other families that were a divorced family, and the judgment I had for them was like, oh my gosh, how could they do that to their kids? Like, that's so selfish. Like, why wouldn't they try to work harder on
Sure.
their marriage? Right. So
Yeah.
I was one
Yeah.
of those people. And so then when I was like living it, I was like, oh my gosh, like now I'm that person who I always thought I would never be. Like, how did this happen? And so that was like a big process of like untangling that judgment and shame and that feeling of failure. Like I felt like, oh my gosh, I let my marriage fail. And that was an awful feeling. But then, to answer your question of like, how did I get out of that? It was through a lot of help. I had several therapists. I had, multiple different therapists along, that journey, because it really was a journey of many, many years of that kind of healing process. I did cognitive behavioral therapy. I did EMDR therapy. I know there was, we did some somatic therapy, like all different modalities. But in the process, I also learned how to kind of heal myself. And that was because I had this training as a coach. And I thought, okay, I noticed that every time I started to have like a negative thought or a very anxious or depressed thought, I would just like stop myself and say, nope, I'm not going to go there. And I would like force myself to like replace it with the new thought. And so that was really, it was just like a big combination. But the other big part was just having a group. I was also in a group therapy, and I was in an affair recovery group, and it was other women who had been dealing with the same thing with their husbands. And so it was kind of just a combination of things. But like I said, it was a journey and a process. And, I'm sure it is still unfolding. We're always healing, right? We're continually through our life, growing and changing. And so, yeah, I guess it never ends.
Absolutely. And well, the body releases the stored energy um, when we're able to bring that wound to light. And now here you are taking the gifts, if you will, from this trauma that you experienced in your life, and you're bringing it forward, and you're helping other women, and you're guiding families and helping youth in going through these very similar processes so that they can learn to navigate their own lives as well. And that's a beautiful thing, to be able to take that wisdom and share it with others. And people then know they're not alone. And you had mentioned that you were part of a group. And I believe that that is pivotal, is to reach out for support, right? To talk to somebody, talk
Mhm.
to a professional person, talk to a trusted person, right? We don't get on Facebook and TikTok and blast out that personal story. We share it with someone that we know has walked that step ahead of us and that can help guide us through that process.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And like you said, it has to be, someone that you trust. You're not going to just go and air your dirty laundry to the whole world or to the whole town, but to find a group. And that might be a paid group, a paid support group, or it might be some friends that you trust, whether it's through a faith-based community or some other type of community that you feel good about, and where you don't feel judged, and where you feel supported, and where you feel like you can like share your most intimate, vulnerable, feelings, and that you're being lifted up.
Sure. I wholeheartedly agree with that, because we need to be in an environment where we can thrive. And that ability to thrive comes from the ability to be vulnerable, to share the deep, dark things that are within us and bring them to light, and do that without the judgment and the shame and the guilt. And even if it's something that we've done and we're looking for forgiveness, we're seeking forgiveness, we should be able to go through that process without being condemned, if you will.
Mhm.
Very good. So tell us a little bit um, about the teen coaching and the parent coaching that you do.
Absolutely. So I'm very, very passionate about the parent-teen relationship, and that's kind of my sweet spot. I think part of that comes from the fact that I was a middle child, and so I was always used to being the peacemaker and being the neutral third party, and so that's what I do a lot of times. But sometimes the situation calls for me just working with a parent where I've had several. It's almost always moms that aren't able to connect with their sons,
Mm.
or and their sons are kind of checked out and disconnected from the family, and it gives the mom a lot of anxiety, like, oh, I need to, something's wrong, and she wants to fix it, and she's like, why isn't he talking to me? Or I've had lots of mother-daughter conflict, which is extremely common, as we all know as well. There's always that butting of heads of mothers and daughters. But my other favorite place to be is just with the teenagers. Like teenagers get such a bad rap, and they're my happy people. I feel good with them, and I love to help them transition from who they believe they currently are into who they have the potential of becoming. So we do a lot of work about, I am this, or other people think this about me. We because teenagers care so much about other people's opinions. And so we work to like really look at those boundaries, like how much weight are we putting on those other versus how much weight is important to just have on our own, like how much we think of ourselves, like what is the importance of that. And I always share the story with my clients that I remember being in middle school, sitting at the lunchroom table, and I was kind of at the end, like that means you weren't in the popular position. I was kind of like the low end of the totem pole. And years later, I'm in therapy telling my therapist about this. And I said, oh my gosh, like I just realized that I was letting them decide my work. And then I said, this was like my biggest statement of all times. I'm like, I am the decider of my work. And when I
Yes.
realized I had that power, and I could have had that power back then, I was like, whoa, like my brain just kind of exploded. And so that's how, I do work with teens and parents. And the number one thing is, our beliefs about ourselves, others in the world around us, and then how we communicate with each other and how we treat each other and what those boundaries are. Like there's so much in there. Obviously, it's hard to just like put it all into just a few sentences, but I'm real passionate about that.
Yeah, and I love that, right? I know that you've done work with self-love and really understanding your own identity and shifting that for yourself and becoming and owning who you authentically are,
Mhm.
instead of that view of, that external view of what you thought the world thought you should be, right? We as young girls were groomed to believe, that we need to have a knight in shining armor to rescue us, and that we're going to grow up to be moms, and we're going to have these roles to play. And then at the end of the day, then whatever's left is what's left for you.
Mhm.
And you took that and you're like, nope, that's not for me.
Right, right. And that was also part of my healing process, because I think I was definitely raised in a very traditional family where my mom served her husband, who was my dad, and the children. And I actually did see her start to carve out part for herself. She went back to work and created her own new career. But still, that was my early programming of like what a mom and a wife is and does. And so I remember, in that process, my journey of, how am I going to get through this trauma with my husband. And my therapist one time, she said, well, who are you if you aren't Mrs., fill in the blank? And I literally said, I have no idea. Like I didn't know who I was as a single woman. And so that was part of the reason why I was so stuck. in that traumatic process because I couldn't get out. Like, right? He kept having the affair, wouldn't stop. He would lie and say, "Oh, it's over," and we'd go to therapy, and I think it was all fixed. And this cycle happened over and over and over again. And there was just like something has got to change, but I couldn't figure out how to change it because I didn't know who I was without being in that marriage. And so it was like that's where I started to literally piece by piece. You know how they say, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps?
Hmm.
That is what I did, like, piece by piece. I was, like, building my career. I was kind of putting myself out there. I was taking new risks that I had never taken before. I started doing public speaking, which was insane. I never wanted to be a speaker my whole life. I thought that terrified me. But when
Yeah.
I started doing that, and then I started to build the confidence, and that's what helped me build my identity, is like, oh, wait, I am a person by myself. I am someone else when I'm not married. I am someone else apart from being a mom. And so that's just like kind of been the fuel behind my fire.
And I love that, right? Because I get to be the love of my life first. I get to do that. And when I love me, it's easier than to love others
Mm,
and to be able to share that love because we're coming from a space of like internally it in internally I'm comfortable with who I am, and I'm connected to my source. I'm connected to myself, and then I have that, like you said, it's that confidence and that self-worth, knowing and trusting. And then that is what you're teaching your children. You are modeling that and they get to see that.
yeah.
And that's so beautiful.
Thank you. And I do feel good about that every day because there was a time, when I was in that stuck place where I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be ruining my kids' lives. They're never going to be the same. Like, this is catastrophic, that this marriage is ending. Like, this is all they've ever known. And what the gift is that they get to have a new version of a mom, a stronger mom, a more independent mom, a more resilient mom. And so they now get to see me doing my thing. And that makes me feel good that if I had never gone through that trauma, if I had just been my old version, I wouldn't have been the same role model for both my daughters and my sons, to see what they have the potential of being when they grow up, right? Like, we are setting the foundation of what they see themselves as becoming.
Yeah. Teaching them boundaries, teaching them to respect themselves and respect others. They respect other people's boundaries, to love themselves. That when, because bad things are going to happen
Mhm.
in our lives, and they're going to be traumatic events. We're going to experience things, and the question really becomes: is that what you allow to drag you under forever, or do you build the resilience and come back from that, and like you said, just a better version of yourself? And
Mhm.
maybe instead of even saying a better version, but you're that authentic version of yourself instead
Yes.
of what everybody else thought you should be.
Right.
And I'm sure as the middle child you were the epitome of the best listener in the world, because we did what we were told. We were in the middle, and we we chameleoned ourselves, if you will, um, to fit in, to blend in, because we
Mhm.
were kind of stuck in the middle of of the the sandwich of children, if you
Right.
will. Um, anyway, we are conditioned to believe that it's that external source. You see it on social media. It's, oh, look at my fancy car, look at my fancy house, look at all these luxury things I have. And then what's the reality though behind that facade? Are they genuinely happy? If they are, that's amazing, right?
Mhm.
It's amazing if they are genuinely happy. But what if they're not, and that's just the false picture that they're painting for the world? Are they connected enough with themselves? um I, for me, that's a really big deal. I love it when people are authentic. Be
Mhm.
real with me. Tell me what's really on your heart, what's really going on.
Mhm.
So you've taken all of this information from your life and you've been able to streamline it and organize it into a fashion where you take it to to work with youth, and you're working with parents, and you're bringing it in, and that's it's so amazing.
Mm.
Talk to me about that process a little bit, about how does that play out?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot to it. I actually have a whole course that's on my website that the very first module is all about kind of becoming who you are. It's becoming your authentic self, and it's called self-awareness. And as parents, we think we know who we are and how we're presenting ourselves. But if you go and ask your kids, they might say something completely different, right? They're seeing parts of you that you're not aware of. We all have blind spots. We all do. It's very universal. And so that's part of what I teach parents is like to have the self-awareness, to understand what your parenting style is. We've talked in the past, one of my presentations is about parenting styles, and there's the helicopter snowplow parents, and there's the dismissive parents who are just a little too busy, or they've got their own lives and they can't emotionally connect with their kids. And then there's the authoritarian parents who are just so incredibly strict, but they don't take their kids' feelings into account. They kind of lack some empathy. It's all about their rules, their way or the highway. And this sweet spot, this is where my work and my personal life completely 100% overlap, is that authoritative parenting style where we are having the warmth and the love and the empathy for our children. Like, we do care if they're upset about something, but we also balance it with the boundaries and the expectations and teaching them the values of our family. And so it's like kids need that. And so many parents these days, all they care about is their kids being happy, and they have no boundaries. And then they're like, wait, why is my kid addicted to phones and social media? It's like, well, because you didn't set up any boundaries, right? And so then they're like, help, like, and so we have to kind of like bring them back. And
Mhm.
that is the harder part of the job. It's easier to set the boundaries from the first place, but most people don't know to do that. And so we help bring them back, and we get those boundaries set up, but we also care about their feelings. We care if their child is upset, or we care, right? And so that's what I do, and I spend a lot of time, and it's really fun to see parents make that transformation.
I love that. And I love that you are allowing people to go out onto your website. They can, take this course, they can see for themselves, and then they can hire a coach to help them see their blind spots. That's the beauty of coaching. It's one of the reasons why I also, do the coaching, because it's being able to walk the journey with someone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what we're seeing just through our experience. Um, it's a beautiful journey to take people on. And as parents, kids are going to they are have been created the way they've been created, and then their world is different. The world that they're growing up in is much different than the world than I grew up in as a child, and that you grew up in as a child. And every generation gets to take, you know, all the good things from the parenting, and take all the things that they want to carry forward, and then they tweak and add and say, like, I really didn't care for this component of it, but I do this, and change it. And so it can start to look different, and then parents can start to get kind of ruffled and threatened and think, well, that's not how we do it.
Right,
But they get to decide ultimately for themselves.
right.
And I think that's really a great thing. um, Now, you had talked about earlier that you had gone through, counseling, and in marriage counseling, and experienced some different, types of therapies, along with um, then becoming a coach yourself, and you have all these different tools.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were going to recommend, a starting point for someone who is going through a similar experience that you have gone through, what would be that base point that you would recommend?
Mm-hmm. Well, there'd be so much to that, but like the very, very first thing I would do would be to just get a support network and get people who, like we said earlier, that you can trust. Um, because that is, like you said earlier, like we store our pain in the body, and our traumas are in our body, and just being able to release that as women, like it's so important to like talk, to like
Yeah.
talk it out, to like share, even if even if you're not that type of a talkative person, like, but like, it's almost like you're sharing the burden or sharing the load, where we're all carrying each other together. And, then once we've healed and we're in a good place, then we can be that for someone else. But to really get support from others is like this place I would start.
Absolutely. Last May, my husband and I went to Teotihuacan, Mexico. We went on a retreat with the Ruiz family, and they took us through the ancient ruins. And one of the places was the mom cave, and they just talked about like the forgiveness of moms and moms doing the best that they can with the information they have. But they took us into the birthing area, where they talked about how the community of women would gather together when a woman would give birth. She would give birth in this water bath thing, and then for weeks the elder women would stay and help her adjust to having this new little one.
Mm.
And the men of the village would bring food, and
Mm.
they would take care of the women while they were all down there with this brand new baby.
Mhm.
And teaching the ways. And I feel like culturally we've lost that connection piece, where you do have that woman who in your life who can say, um babies are all different. Teenagers are all different. um you're doing the best you can as a mom, and they still, they're another human being, and they have their own minds. And so we can internalize it and take it really personally. But it was just so beautiful to hear them talk about how this would unfold, and how the women would rally around and gather around this new mama. And I think,
I love that. I think it's just such a beautiful image. And it kind of brings me back to the theme of the podcast, which is, these days we're so isolated and we keep secrets, and we don't have those open connections with our community, or we don't have like necessarily a village the way they had back then, because we're too embarrassed, or we have too much shame to admit there's a problem, or we're struggling. And, from the time they're babies, we all have like, oh, we don't want people to know that my baby can't talk yet, or they can't walk yet, or they're not doing this, like, right? Like, we're kind of like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, they're reading and they're 3 years old. Oh yeah, you're right. Like, we're all like trying to like make everybody look better than they, and so it's just to like break down those walls, and just to be vulnerable, and to be accepted, and to not be judged. And if you can find a community like that, it's amazing.
Right? Could you just, and to be able to raise your hand and say, you know what, this is really scary.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about for you, but with my first baby, I had absolutely no idea. I mean, I did call my mom a lot. I was like, oh, I have no idea. you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
And even my dad, because I would be like, I don't know what to do. She's, I've done everything. And, just pulling in those women that you can, um, and men who have been through these processes before,
Mm-hmm.
have them help you, have the community go, join the groups. But in person, I'm really, let's get back to in person. But if you can't do it in person, the social media, the groups are fantastic as well. So tell me a little bit about your self-care program, and making sure that you take care of you first.
Yeah, that's it. That's a really good question. Um, I do put an effort into making sure I'm getting my literally physical exercise, because I'm not always good about that. I'm really good about my sleep. Like, I need my sleep, so that's like number one. I'm a really healthy eater, and that's so important for our brain health, like our mental and physical, our just cognitive abilities. But I do definitely carve out time for myself still. Like, I do still have a coach. I am still involved in group therapy. I do still kind of continually seek that personal growth and that healing process, because that is my self-care. Like, that's where, and I'm also writing a book. And I feel like, to me, that's been a very therapeutic process, is like finally putting something down and say, this has been my experience, and this is what I have, gone through. And I want people to know, if they're going through something similar, that they are not alone, that I was there too, and I came out better for it on the other side. I learned and I grew from a bad situation. So I'm all about my self-care. I do everything and anything. I like to try new things too.
Mhm.
Um, I'm very adventurous with trying out different types of things, but yeah, it's the most important thing as a mom. I really strongly am a big advocate for that because there are those moms who are doing everything for their kids, everything, and they don't take time for that. And it's like some of them, I've heard them say like, well, I don't have time for that, or oh. It's like, yes, but, or yes, and if you could carve out the time, how much better would you then be? And so it's kind of like it's either a negative spiral or a positive spiral.
Right. And kind of just goes back into that belief system, right? That belief system is that, well, as the mom, I should be tending to everything.
Hmm.
And what's left is that scrap of time at the end of the day, maybe, if there is that for me. And that can build resentment.
Yeah,
And just because we can do all the things doesn't mean that we should be doing all the things. In fact, it's my own personal belief that, it's our responsibility to teach our kids to be independent, to do the things for themselves, to be responsible members of society, to do the
absolutely. I mean,
thing.
you're honestly doing a disservice to your kids if you are doing everything for them. I just knew that inherently. So I remember teaching my kids to do their own laundry. Like even my boys do their own laundry. I taught them in elementary school. I remember this one time, my daughter, who was only 5, I found her blanket, her favorite blanket, it had a name. And I was like, "Oh, you wash Fuzzy." And she said, "Yeah, I just didn't like how she smelled." It was a she, it was a blanket. um, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh," I was pretty proud of myself. I'm like, I taught her how to do that. Like I've taught my kids how to cook. Like they're all very independent in the kitchen. We do I do have to put a few reminders into to do the cleanup process, but they do that. And so um I love that I have taught my kids these things. And the thing is, the key to that is to allow for imperfection, right? That there is going to be a mess in the kitchen, that there is, maybe they do. My son actually did mix his darks and his lights and they messed up all the white shirts, and right, like to allow for that imperfection and to know that it is a learning process, but that you are doing them the best service if you can just kind of teach them, model the behavior, show them how to do it. I always say, if you can play an iPad, you can run a dishwasher or a washing machine,
Absolutely.
right? It's just a few buttons. It's not rocket science, right? Just, let them do it.
Yes, yes. And right, it's progress over perfection.
Hmm.
To learn it in teaching our kids, it is okay to fail. It is okay. Yep, you spilled the juice. Okay, that's okay. We're gonna wipe
Right.
it up.
Yeah.
It's an easy fix, right? We're gonna wipe it up.
Mhm.
Because in life we're gonna spill. I think life is gonna get messy. And the younger we can teach them that that's okay, the better off they are. Less anxiety, less depression,
Yeah.
because they know that they have that bounce back and that
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah. And to let them feel a little bit of that pain. Like as moms, we hate, so that the one thing we don't want is our kids to feel pain. And that's where those helicopter moms, the ones that are kind of like lacking the boundaries,
Sure.
those are moms who want their kids to succeed so much because we don't want them to experience pain. But the disservice in that is they are inevitably going to feel pain, especially as an adult. And if they haven't had that practice, that resilience, the bounce back, they won't know how to handle it. And so the key is to, like, little by little, bit by bit, let them feel that, let them experience it. And then you're there to comfort them, you're there to support them, you're there to empathize with the pain, but we're not trying to prevent them from feeling that, or we're not trying to immediately fix it without like going through the process of feeling those feelings.
Absolutely. And I have adult children. It's still such a weird sentence to me, but they're well into adulthood. And one of the things I learned from John Maxwell was, you know, unless asked for, you do not try to solve your adult children's problems, or give them advice unless it's asked for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that it's a beautiful thing because when they do come, then I know, like, okay, this is my opportunity to serve.
Mm-hmm.
But if I jump in and just blah, blah, blah and tell them, this is what you need to do and this is how you fix your problem, how do they learn to fix their problems on their own, right? They have to be able to think through those things themselves. And it's a tough lesson. It really, it
Yeah.
can be, it can be hard some days because you see it, right? And you don't want them to hurt and you want to save them from the stuff, but that's how we grow. That's
Mm,
why we're here. That's what the human experience is about. We're going
yeah.
to experience it. And again, going, back to the things that you've dealt with, and let's just touch on the emotional intelligence piece, because you were saying, we're not going to go about and tell the whole town our business.
Mm,
We're going to seek people that we know are trusted and that we can confide in and bring to the surface whatever it is that's weighing us down on the inside.
mhm.
And we know that that is in and of itself a whole process that you have walked and learned and been able to stay out of the judgment piece of it, because you have walked it, right? So you get to turn then and teach people to this is something that can happen to anybody, right? It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from.
Mhm.
This sort of thing can happen to anybody. And with that being said, i I think it's important. I think it's important to come on to things like this and talk about um the secrets, if you will, and
Mm,
talk about the process of the secrets. And um I just wondered if you have any other advice that you would like to share with
mhm.
the audience today in regards to um, how to heal, steps to take, how to work with your kids, etc.
Yeah, the one thing that's popping up for me right now is as you asked me that, I was kind of just like contrasting like the old version of myself when I was in the trauma and when I was like in the process of healing versus kind of who I am now. And part of that is that identity of like I'm a new I think we said not improved version, but my more authentic version of self. But the part I wanted to get to is um I was judging myself a lot as I was kind of what I call a terrible mom during that traumatic phase. And I have forgiven myself. I've had to go through a self forgiveness process. But the piece that was missing for me was because I was so anxious and I was dealing with so much and I was so overwhelmed. I wasn't able to be present for my kids and I wasn't able to kind of be with them in their emotions and like be with them in the present moment. I remember my brain like constantly spinning about the problem I was dealing with and I couldn't just be there. And so that's like my number one piece of advice. Like if nothing else, just be present with your kids and try to, you're this vessel where you are able to absorb some of their feelings, right? Like it's this fine line of a boundary because we don't take on all their feelings, but we can be with them and sit with them in their feelings so that way they know they're not alone, that they have a support, and that will make them the strongest kids is if they have that strong foundation from a parent.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. I love that. Please share with the audience how they can find you.
Yeah,
Social media.
absolutely. I always love more followers on social media, but the best way to find me is just my website, which is positivelyhealthycoaching.com. And there's the links to everything on there, all the information, my course, which I mentioned, that's called Cracking the Parent Code for moms or dads as well. And yeah, but it's just positivelyhealthycoaching.com.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And thank you for being here today on the Secret Keepers podcast and sharing all of your wisdom with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Corinne.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Secret Keepers podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a like and follow so we can invite you back. And if you just want more, visit CorrineZuleger.com. Remember, you're not alone.